joining us. It's good to see all of you again, and I think I know most of you. For those of you I don't know, my name's Will Alderson. I'm the Director of Studies at CQU English at our campus in Melbourne, and also the convener of the Direct Entry Programs SIG. I'd also like to introduce Cara Deneen. There's Cara up there. Cara is the Associate Director at Macquarie University English Language Centre and the convener of the Assessment SIG. So Cara and I had a discussion after the conference in September, and we thought it would be useful to open up a discussion about how our centres have adapted some of the assessments for the online environment. So we decided to put together this session and a follow-up on the 2nd of December and really just sort of give everybody a chance to talk about some of the adaptations they've made and extend those discussions in some groups. So I'll just share a slide here to give you a bit of an outline of how today will look. Can everyone see that? So we'll start off with 3 short presentations from Cara, Tony Hickey from University of Sydney and Santina Scully from La Trobe University. These will be short presentations, just for 5 minutes each, and we've got time for 1 question after each of those. We'll then move into a breakout room for a discussion for 10 minutes. And that's just a chance for the groups to talk about some of the presentations they've heard. Would those adaptations work in their own centres? And how have they adapted similar assessments? So a couple of the questions that can guide those discussions, I'm just sort of displaying these here. I mean, you may like to talk about something a bit different, but ideally, it's a good chance to sort of expand on what you hear in those short presentations. So I'll put this in the chat later, so don't worry if you haven't jotted that down yet. So after the breakout discussions, we'll bring it back to the full group and hear from some of the different groups. And then we'll go through for a second round. So in the second round, Svetlana Lukovic from ACU, James Heath from UNSW, and myself will give a short presentation. And we'll do the same thing again with the breakout rooms. So I think it'll be quite a busy 90 minutes. Yeah, so without any further ado, I will hand over to Cara.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Will. I'll just share mine. Hurry up. Okay, so I thought I'd talk to you today. We made a couple of changes on the assessment for a direct entry program, and one of them was well, this was actually like a new one that came in. When we shifted online, we recognised at the time everybody was in lockdown and isolation, and we recognised the need to create strong communities that we and how to do that in that online space when we didn't have the classroom experience was a bit confronting, really. So this was an effort to make those discussion forums much more of a communicative channel and really focus a lot of attention on that. So we created what we called at the time interactive writing reflection, and the aim was, you know, there were weekly readings that the students did, and then they had to engage with each other about the theme of the topic on a weekly basis. And we wanted them to do this beyond classroom time, so that those who were in Australia, in Sydney, away from their families and in lockdown, there was a little bit of something beyond the, you know, those 4 hours of class delivery that they could reach out to. And so the task itself, it asks them to participate in those forums and then to reflect on their engagement as a collegiate professional, and that's the focus there. And they had to do a 350-word, I think it was 300 actually at the time, reflection on their engagement, and with particular reference to the frequency of their engagement and the quality and the range of interactions. And we also wanted them to demonstrate contributions from the discussion board with screenshots of the way that they've undertaken those communicative functions. So beyond the frequency, where we said, look, it should be, we didn't give them a number of times to do it, but just that they should be sort of regularly participating in there. And we asked them for the quality of interactions. We said that it needed to be relevant, respectful, and we talked about and showed them. We did lessons on the right sorts of modal verbs to use, the sorts of hedging techniques that they could use in order to manage those communicative functions respectfully, politely. And also they needed to have clear language that was accurate and easy to understand. And then we put in a range of interactions that they should be doing. So inviting others to comment on ideas, agreeing and giving reasons for their agreement, disagreeing respectfully and giving reasons for that. And also perhaps helping someone else to understand a concept or an idea that they haven't picked up on. So we thought that was a useful focus and provided a lot of scope for useful language input. And the students responded really well to it. I'll show you some of the sample language that came out of the reflections. When you read these reflections, you'll see that, some of that language was quite good, thanks for the art. I'll give you a moment to read through. I won't speak over the top, just have a quick scan. So this one's showing how to, disagree and explaining why. Another one showing that how they've clarified a certain point and then drew on external sort of information to support that. Another one there where they are asking for more information, asking for clarification, etc. Have different points of view. Yeah. So we figured that a lot of these functions are things that they need to do in the classroom. And at university as well, and often with their these sorts of forums are a part of their university course as well. And as we know, a lot of the times international students are very quiet around when they have to draw on pragmatic skills. So the task itself was good, and the teachers commented that the range of interaction on the discussion board was phenomenal. That they found that students really were doing well with it. When it came to the actual assessment task, the grading of the reflection, we set up the rubric with, that they had sort of done this frequently, that the quality of interactions were good. We graded them on the range of interactions that they were able to sort of talk about, and that they'd been able to reflect on that quite well. Now, when we did that, the feedback from the teachers was that although having the task there to do, it certainly did fuel the students' motivation to be an active part of those discussion forums and being able to, having that sort of focus on the different range of functions that they needed to perform was very, very helpful for their language development. But we really didn't get it right on the grading of the task. The teacher feedback was there's not enough language to grade here. We're grading range of functions and we're grading, the quality, but there's nothing, not enough in there that's language specific. And as much as it's a good task, it wasn't enough for a direct entry program where our main focus is going to be language. So we reworked it. It's quite a bit different to what it started out to be, but it still goes on. Students are still engaging in the discussion forums, and we get them to do a reflection, this time using Gibbs. A sort of an adapted version of the Gibbs reflective cycle or reflective framework, I think it is. And this time they have to talk about a learning experience, and it might be something that they do on their discussion forum, or it might be something else that they do as a part of the class, whether it's a group work activity. And we grade them on the quality of the reflection, that they're able to sort of describe the feelings and provide an evaluation and analysis. And then we go drill straight down into the language part of it, so the coherence, cohesion, the vocab resource, and the grammatical resource as well. So that's where it's come to now, and we're going. Well, the direct entry course has just started this week, in fact. So I'm looking forward to seeing the sorts of writing that comes from that, and discussing with the teachers their thoughts about it. So that's that's it from me on that one.
Thanks, Cara. Does anyone have any questions for Cara? Can either jump in or put it in the chat bar. Nick, I see.
I've got a question.
Hi. Cara, that looks fantastic. I thought the first iteration or the first version looked really good, but the second version, it makes a lot of sense that you moved back to the fundamentals of language or academic language there. But the new criteria seem to let go of quite a few of the things that were task specific.
I feel that too.
You've answered my question.
Yeah, look,
okay.
I want to see what comes out of this one. I really liked building in the range of activities that they were, a range of functions that they were being asked to do, because it just, the washback was great for language development and pragmatic skills. But this one's being managed in a different way. I think there'll still be some good outcomes, so we'll see. We'll see where that comes to.
Yeah, great. Very authentic too, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
Cara, it's Craig here, mate.
Hey, Craig, you're a bit soft.
Oh, sorry.
Not like
I am
you.
a quiet-spoken man.
Yeah, you are.
I have a question. What are you after with this assessment? I think it's really neat, and I love the student responses in the first iteration. But just sort of broadly speaking, in terms of your, I don't know, your learning outcomes or whatever you guys call them, what are you driving at there?
Well, it was a writing, so it was interactive writing. So we wanted to, so we were shifting away from the academic paragraph and the academic essay that really is a main focus of direct entry program.
Sure.
And we wanted to say, okay, well, let's change it up. We're in this circumstance now. Students need to be interactive in this online space. Let's develop an interactive writing component and make sure we build in pragmatics to that. So that was the focus. It's still language based, but yeah, we hadn't quite captured it.
Okay, and that explains the teachers saying that the sample's not quite big enough for. When
you read through those samples, you see the actual screenshots that they've used. There's some great language in there, which may or may not have been there, could be sort of enhanced, but the language that they used to link it together was very much, and here's me doing this, and here I do that. And the reflection task itself didn't provide enough scope for their writing.
No, that's right. But it looked like it was hellishly valuable for reflection and self-evaluation. Yes?
Exactly.
You sort of six of one, half dozen of the other there.
Yeah.
I like the first bit, to be honest.
Yeah,
I like the fact that they were reflecting and evaluating themselves.
Yeah. We'll see where the second one comes to, but I like it too. It's one of my favorites.
Cool. Interesting task.
Thanks, Cara. We might move on. I think if anyone's got any other questions for Cara, feel free to pop them in the chat bar for the moment. But I might hand over to Tony Hickey from CET. Yep, thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Will. I'll share my screen with you, and I'll also be sharing the sound. So let's hope this works, everyone. Can you see that? Can anyone see that?
Yep.
Good. Thanks.
Yes, you can see.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cara. I think mine's going to focus a little bit more on practicalities, and I'm just going to look at what we did with our listening and reading assessments or tests, basically, moving them from what was pretty much pen and paper, teacher invigilated in a classroom in the flesh assessment to a completely online type assessment, and some of the challenges we faced and what we had to, how we dealt with them. So the format we tried to, I mean, this is a test that we've been using for over 10 years and it served us reasonably well. So we didn't want to change too much. We tried to keep the previous format as much as possible, but it relied a lot in the past on the teachers who were conducting the test to break it up into the different sections and perform certain operations between each section of the text. So we had a listening part one, which is transactional. Part two is, which was a lecture where they listen and take notes first, and then we give them the questions afterwards, and they have to use their notes after they've listened to the lecture to answer the questions about the lecture. And then we gave them 10 minutes transfer time to put all their answers onto the answer sheet. And that was followed by a separate listening test based on 3 texts and 40 questions on that. And yes, so that's we tried to stick pretty much to that as much as possible because we invested a lot of time in creating these tests. We didn't want to just we didn't have time to, or the resources to throw them out completely and replace them with anything different. So we needed to adapt these to the online version. So that was the format that we kept as much as possible. The problem was because of the limitations of our LMS, which we use to conduct the quiz, we weren't able to force the students to listen to the lecture and take notes before they saw the questions. And so we sort of had to leave that up to them. The problem with the questions are ordered so that they're based on having to answer from notes, and so they're not in the order that you hear them on the recording. So we just advised the students strongly that they needed to take notes when they listened, because the questions would not come in order, and if they tried to answer the questions while they were listening, they would miss some. And they seem to follow that advice. The logistics, as you can imagine, the previous format relied on, I think it was 7 different documents that the students had to use and was handed to them at various times of the test. I had a conversation with our printer a few weeks ago, and he's quite distressed that the loss of tens of thousands of dollars that we used to give to him every year. But I suppose it's been good in terms of saving paper, saving money for us, and there are other benefits to it. The other problem, or the other challenge of the previous thing was, we have sometimes very large volumes of students. Finding appropriate test venues for 600 or 700 students to do a test at the same time is quite a challenge. You need to have the space so that they're not all sitting right next to each other. You need to have decent audio in those rooms for the listening test, and you need to be able to be sure that there's enough teachers to invigilate the number of students in each room. Going online was, so yeah, we needed LMS access. We use Canvas here, and we use the quiz function in Canvas and converted our tests into a Canvas quiz. Students needed an adequate and reliable internet connection, and we had several problems where people's internet fell out, or it just wasn't, their connection wasn't strong enough to cope with the data that was needed for the test. The audio, we think, there was part of the problem. They need a webcam for invigilation through ProctorU. We used ProctorU for supervising the tests. And we still let them use note-taking paper so that they were able to take notes during the lecture and then use their notes to answer the questions. And I'll actually switch now and just give you a bit of a sample of the test. Here we are. Okay, so that's what it looks like in Canvas. Or that's almost exactly what the students see. I'm looking at the teacher version here. So they can play the audio.
Hi, what a surprise. I haven't seen you since our school graduation.
We have since found a way that our tech Wunderkinder here have found a way to fix the audio so that students can only play it once and they can't pause or navigate through that audio recording while they're doing it, which is great because that's more like what we expected in the first place. Then they just go through that. The big problem with this is because we had to put the whole test in one Canvas quiz. Otherwise, we noticed before when we tried to have each section as a separate quiz, we were getting a lot of problems when students left one quiz and went out to another. They were having tech problems. They were losing their internet connection at that time. So we had to put it all in one quiz. So there's part 1 and there's part 2. And then we go all the way down to the reading test. And because we don't have separate question papers and text papers, we repeated the text after every few questions so that they didn't have to scroll up and down too much within that quiz to go between the text and the questions about the text. The good thing about it mostly was the marking. With the old format, we had lots of teachers who, after the test, we would lock in a room because we used to let teachers take the marking home with them. But after a while, someone would say, "Oh, I've accidentally thrown my class tests in the recycling," or whatever. So we now keep teachers locked up in the room with the tests and keep a careful eye on them. And that was quite labour intensive. So it took 2.5 hours to get through all the marking with up to 40 teachers working on them. We had a few nominated adjudicators who would deal with the grey area. So if there was an answer that was in the answer key that was possibly right, then they would check with an adjudicator who would make a call on it, and the idea was that would keep it consistent. And yes, we accepted minor spelling errors. We had to track answer sheets so they didn't get lost. And then everybody had to enter from the paper answer sheets, had to enter the scores into our database afterwards. The online version is much easier with that. From Canvas, we get a spreadsheet with all the students and all their answers. You can, the LMS scores all the predetermined correct answers that we know. The grey areas can be just done by one person quite easily by sorting with the spreadsheet. And you can still deal with things like spelling errors and so on. And then it's much easier to just upload all the totals from the spreadsheet into the LMS, which is nice. So that's what's changed.
Thanks, Tony. Any questions for Tony?
Yeah, I've got
Ian?
a question, Tony.
Yep.
Thanks for that, Tony. Looks really interesting. How do you go with ProctorU?
Well, we're using them again, but we really don't have much choice. We found them patchy, I suppose. When we use for these tests, we use ProctorU Review, which is the one where they don't have a live proctor, but someone will watch it at some point and send us a report on anything suspicious. It's good in that you've got that record from everyone from ProctorU. And the other good thing about ProctorU is that it's consistent. We've also tried a bit of teacher invigilation on some of the less high stakes tests that we've done. But we just find it really hard to be consistent when you've got a number of teachers invigilating. Some teachers will be much stricter than others, and it's really hard to be sure. So at least with ProctorU, we have that appearance, at least, of consistent invigilation. But we did actually find with ProctorU, when we reviewed the videos ourselves, that sometimes ProctorU reported to us as suspicious, something that didn't look suspicious at all. And then when we looked at a couple of others that they thought was okay, we noticed some very dodgy behavior. So we're hoping that ProctorU has lifted its game since 6 months ago. They seem to have already. They just seem to have a better capacity now. I think they might have been hit by a very big surge in demand and didn't have the staff to cope with it and the training. But let's hope that it goes better this time.
Yep. Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
Tony, just a question on managing your test versions. Once you've run a test in that scenario, will you rest it for a period of time, or will you be able to come back to it again?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a really small risk that some students have managed to, take some screenshots and share them or whatever, but I think it's possible. And so we're not reusing any of the tests we've done. Luckily, we had a bit of a bank of tests that we had been using in the old format, but we're quickly running out of those now because we've had to do, so one good thing was in the past, because of the logistics, we had to run 2 separate tests at the same time. Sorry, one in the afternoon and one in the evening to cope with the numbers. We don't need to do that anymore. We can just run, 700 students. We can give the same one test at one time, but we always need to have an extra test available for resits because it just doesn't work for everybody. So we're still pretty much using up 2 tests every time we run this assessment task.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I noticed there's a question in the chat there, but I might leave you to respond to that one, just in the interest of time there. But thanks for that. I'll hand over now to Santina from La Trobe. Thanks, Santina.
Hi, everyone. My presentation is going to be a little less organised and detailed, but first of all, I'd like to thank Tony for reminding me just what a headache on-campus assessments actually were. So busy worrying about the online version, but it wasn't all rosy when we're on campus either. Let's see, let me share my screen now. What I've done very, very quickly, I focused a little bit on what we were doing to keep, or what changes we made to keep our assessment, the academic integrity on our assessments. So yes, we used the tech to deliver, but we also used it to monitor. We didn't use any commercial invigilation process for the small numbers we had. It simply wasn't practical. And we, on the other hand, took a different road. We, in the past, were moving towards more of a assess the process as well as the product and going online. We relied a little bit more on that in the post-exam period, if you like. And we also, in the pre-exam period, spent a little more time talking to students about academic integrity and also our expectations of what we expected of them at this time. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing there, and I might just go to one of our assessments and talk about some of our procedures there very quickly. Essentially, we have, we looked at I've organized, and over the period, excuse me while I'm trying to share while I do this. Okay, for the pre-assessment period, starting from orientation of course and lessons, of course, we went through and would state very clearly to our students what we expected. They needed a quiet area. They needed to be on Zoom. Zoom is what we used for invigilation. We would put students into breakout rooms. They would need to share their screen. They could only have one tab open, which would be the Moodle, the LMS Moodle tab. They had to have their microphones on. We needed to see, they needed to be able to show the teachers that their desks were clear, that there was no one in the room, and that they were working on their own. We would go through that. We also had them go through an academic, excuse me, I'm trying to get this up, an academic integrity. There we are. Can you see that? Statement of authorship.
Yep,
someone will have to say yes. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, because I can't see your faces now. Good. So we added to our statement there, of course, what we expect on the online assessments. At first, we had students taking their exams on phones as well. So we had to make sure that our exams and our assessments online were able to be seen and responded to through mobile phones. Okay. Oh, excuse me. So back to our assessments. Excuse me. Okay, so as part of that pre-process, we also went through a practice exam so the students would be familiar with what they had to do in the online time. And let me show you now. Can you now see my exams here?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Tony, you were mentioning the problem about getting them to listen to something once. The way we solved that problem was to give a time limit. So in this case, 14 minutes. It was essentially enough time to listen once. So once they went into the quiz to do this, the students don't go this way. I'm just going to go this way to show you. All right. As you can see, this listening is almost 12 minutes long. We gave them 14 minutes. That way they would have a little extra time in case, you know, something went wrong on the internet between them starting and finishing. Okay. Also, as part of this, we had them do a true-false for the Academic Integrity Pledge, just to remind them once again that we expected them to be honest and not cheat, of course. One of the things we're worried about is, one of the things about cheating is that students, there are many motivations. One, of course, is stress and lack of confidence, etc. But the other one is that there's the opportunity. So the reason why we stress so often, we are watching you, we can see what you're doing kind of thing, is that in an attempt to reduce the opportunity or the appearance of opportunity. So again, I think it was, sorry, I can't remember if it was Cara now or Tony, about whether, about having to take notes while they listen. Because we did 2 quizzes, they didn't have the question at the time they took the notes. They would listen, they would take notes, and then they would come to the next section here, where when they opened this up, are you following me? Someone warn me if you're not. Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Good. Okay. Let's see this. Okay. So at this point, they will get the question. So they use the information from the listening, their notes, and the reading below, and then they write their response there. Now, the danger here for those of you with Moodle is that there's the time limit to complete these assessments. And there is automatic saving, but the automatic saving only really works if you have an hour-long exam, and our exams are 2 hours. So there are every term 1 or 2 students whose exams don't get saved. Now, we had 2 processes, and one is a bit tricky, where we had the teachers, the invigilators, as they go through, open up at about 5 minutes before the end. And if you like, screenshot and save everyone's responses about 5 minutes before the end, which is very finicky, but we would have a version then of what the students were doing. The other thing we were doing is reminding students to save at the end. However, we still have 1 or 2 who get who don't have their exams saved, and so we have that reset back up, of course. For teachers, we have procedures, we have a script, we keep it consistent in that way. So there is the steps they take beforehand to get the students online in Zoom and on Moodle, and then there's the script to take them through for the whole session. And that's essentially, any other, we adapted it, we made it shorter. At first we had no listening, because listening, especially when you're on a phone or who knows where these students are doing these exams, is a real challenge. We finally found a way to put listening on our LMS, and we are using that, but we're always having students who will need to do a reset despite this. Okay, that is my presentation. Very short.
Thanks, Santina. We're just actually running a little bit behind schedule, so maybe if anyone's got any questions for Santina, I might ask you to pop them in the chat bar. What we'll do now, though, we'll go out into some breakout rooms for 10 minutes. I'll just post those 2 questions into the chat bar as well. Sophie, I think, are you organising the breakout rooms?
She's possibly on mute, but yes, I know she
Yes,
is.
I hope so.
Yeah, I am, Will. Just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are the questions there. You might like to talk about some of the adaptations that the speakers have presented, or you might like to talk about what you've done in your own centre. If you could agree for someone to give a bit of feedback when we come back to the main room in 10 minutes time as well, that would be really good. So yeah, Sophie, I'll leave it with you.
Sure.
Thanks, Sophie. I think we've got most people back now. So we might invite some of you to give a bit of feedback from the discussions in your groups. I know I was in group 1 with Maria, and we were just talking a little bit about Kara's reflective writing task. I know, Maria, correct me if I misunderstood, but you are looking at or you are doing a similar type of reflective writing task at UNSW.
Yeah. Also with the intention of getting students to meaningfully post and you know, be able to increase that activity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for us, we have an assessment where we are requiring students to respond or post online in response to a text or video and engage with other students, but we're not assessing or we're not asking them to reflect on that beyond that. So while I think it's a really interesting assessment, I think we would need to review our learning outcomes in order to go down that path. But yeah, certainly an interesting way of assessing that, I think. I'm not sure who was in group 2, if anyone.
Yeah. I was in group 2. I think we did a useful, interesting discussion about the approach of whether, my sense was, Cara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was a new assessment that you created for the online world. Is that correct?
It was.
Yeah, and how Tony had said that what they were trying to do was to keep things as similar as possible, I suppose, then, and you go down a different pathway there. And
it had a slight, only a small weighting. It was a toe in the water approach. I think it was a 15% overall, and then we balanced it. We kept, you know, other parts of the course the same.
Yeah, but I think just, and that's a general. It's an interesting question, I think, for us all to ask ourselves, you know. And even if we do have the same assessments, what adaptations do we need to make? And Tony there talked about putting in the reading text several times was an adaptation to try and make that, I suppose, as user friendly in a sense as you possibly could. So I think we talked about that and the type of adaptations and type of testing you might need to do before you actually go live with things. So it was a good conversation.
I think that is a really good question, because as we start to, we've got these courses that are online, these direct entry courses, we've always built them on that 10 weeks, you know, with immersion sort of studies. What does it mean when they're in this space? All of our test constructs have changed. Even if it's the same task, it's different. And it's a difficult one to measure, to really understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone from group 3?
Yes. Santina mentioned that she forgot to say that they've also introduced quiz into the new way of assessing the students at the end, which has a component of reading comprehension and paraphrasing. But the main part of the conversation was about that interactive assessment that Cara's implemented in her center, that James mentioned that they're going along that path as well. We talked about focusing on process for our students, although the use of language is important, but also a task like that is authentic, and it tries to help the students understand the process of language development as well. And the fact that we also talked about academic integrity, how to ensure that through an assessment piece like that, which we came to the idea of ethical use of what's available to students, like translation tools and paraphrasing tools that teaches students and educate them in terms of how they can take advantage of it without crossing the line of academic misconduct or plagiarism. I hope I covered everything, but Cara, Santina, James, please step in if I missed anything. I covered everything. Well done.
Well done, Hussein. Thanks. Okay, it looks like we had 8 groups. So again, I'm just conscious of time, so we might not have time to get around everyone. But we'll move on to group 4, I think we're up to.
That's us. Here we go. Yes. Does anyone want to talk? Where are you all? Where's Nora and Lyndon, Hora and Ruth? Oh, I can't even see you all.
If you to go ahead.
You there you are. Yeah. So what we talked about, some of the issues that we have from time to time with the test assessments. In particular, one way to get around, I suppose, students from seeing the questions before the listening, whatever, and also sometimes students have difficulties accessing certain parts of the test. So what we do for the listening, for example, is with our Blackboard that we're using, we're able to just have the questions, obviously, in the test, and then the teacher has full control over when they play the recording. So that sort of like limits the amount of times, obviously the students can listen to the recording. So that's one thing that we do to overcome that, that factor. Ruth, did we want to say anything else? I can't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, we're basically, we focus more on the second question. So we're basically comparing our assessments a little bit and talking about, well, similar issues in the end, similar challenges and face around test security.
Yeah, basically the test.
And things like that. So yeah, it was quite just a general discussion in that sense.
Yeah. Anyway. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks, Ruth. Group 5, I think we're up to.
I may as well speak for our group. So who do we have? Sarah, Alejandra and Rosemarie. We found lots of good things to say about all 3 approaches that we heard from. What we ended up dwelling on was something that I think came through, and forgive me, I can't remember which session, but the challenge of, I guess, exams going out into the wild and making sure that we keep up with production, but you can't possibly write new reading and listening tests at the rate that you would like to totally mitigate the possibility of screenshots and so forth, as Tony mentioned. So we were talking about, I think, Sarah, you called it a modular approach where you reuse texts, whether they be written or audio, but you tweak the items, or where possible you resequence them, but also mixing and matching the tests and items between tests, the texts and items between tests. So it becomes very tricky for students to hope to memorize a set of answers and to reuse them in a test, because even if they do come across the same text, it's not going to be followed by the same one that followed in the previous iteration of the same exam. So yeah, that's where we got stuck on for a while there. But yeah, I think that's probably the area where we thought that there was a good middle road, I guess, in adapting print tests to an online context. Is there anything else I missed there, guys?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, especially with that modular approach.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I am conscious there were a few other groups, but just in the interest of time, we might move on to our other presenters. There will be another chance for breakout rooms towards the end of the session. So I might hand over to Svetlana, and following Svetlana, we've got James Heath, and then I'll talk about our listening assessment quite briefly. So Svetlana, over to you.
Thank you. Well, my name is Svetlana Lukovic. I'm academic manager at ACU Center for Languages. And this time I'm speaking for 3 programs that we have with now what we call education pathways. So my presentation will be a little bit different. I'm not sharing any specific adaptation, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we had, and I just spare me till I find my files. Oh, sorry. So how do I find my files? Where are they? Sophie, Sophie, I have a problem.
Yep. You just.
Where do I go to the screen?
Maybe just, are you trying to look for your PowerPoint?
Yes, it's on my desktop and it's not working at the moment.
Okay, can you just like
yeah, I'm going
tab or
yeah, I'll open
minimize the Zoom? Yep.
Yeah, I'll just try to find it. Just give me a second. I apologize for that. I don't usually teach with Zoom, so and I don't teach very often, so that's another thing. Okay, I'll try to find it this way. Oh, there we are. No. Well, I might start talking. I'll try to find it. Just give me a second. That's what happens to students as well, not just me.
So do you have it open already, or?
I think, no, it's not open.
Okay.
It's because I didn't open it, so it's open now. So I would be able to share now, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so where is it? Why is it says fail. Okay.
So Lana, do you want us to move on, maybe move on to James and come back to you?
Yeah, if it doesn't show on your screen, so maybe we can move to James and then I'll try again. Okay.
Yeah, and
I'll send it to Sophie and she can share it.
Good idea.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right. So I'll go ahead.
Sorry, James.
No worries. So hi, everyone. James, if I haven't met you. Very briefly, the context, which I'm sure is similar to everyone's. I'm going to talk about our direct entry program, the last 10 years of that. We're delivering that online, of course, and using open learning as our platform. The majority of our students are postgrad, but some undergrads as well. And like everyone across the sector, we've faced the challenges of exam security. In our case, we don't have the option of proctoring, so at a UNSW level, the decision's been made to not use proctoring. And so, we have the challenge of ensuring exam security, academic integrity, and also, of course, working at scale. So we're looking at how to ensure that our online assessments can work effectively at scale. But we've seen this really as an opportunity to really move towards authentic assessment. And so we're kind of seeing this shift away from that traditional exams-based high-stakes assessment towards much more authentic assessment, integrated assessment, looking at the ways that students are really operating at university. So I just want to share one particular task, actually an integrated task that has a lot of components to it. So it's a research project. And there are two key things, I guess, outcomes of the project, which is a presentation, which is delivered about halfway through the course, and then a essay, which is delivered at the end of the course. And the two kind of scaffold towards each other. So basically what we're trying to achieve here is something which is a really genuine, authentic task, which touches all of the 7 course learning outcomes from our course along the way, and it kind of ties the whole course together in this narrative online. And so just quickly stepping you through the process, students choose a topic which is related to their field of study. So they find an issue that they want to analyze, and they want to investigate various ways to solve that issue. They develop the topic in consultation with peers. So on Open Learning, we have a group space where students share background articles and information and gradually help each other work towards a purpose statement, which will be the backbone of their presentation and their essay. And they work in consultation with teachers as well to develop that purpose statement. They keep a log of their research, and which is then built into an annotated bibliography, which then goes into further depth of analysis of the different academic sources they've found to support their research. As part of that, we don't just want students to look at academic journal articles and do reading, but also do some listening as well for background information from various sources, so that we are developing listening skills through this process as well. From this, students start building their presentation. They provide an abstract to the other members of their class in order for them to understand the presentation and follow it during the presentation, which happens live via Zoom. The class members form a panel to ask questions at the end of the presentation. And then that's about halfway through the course, at which point the focus shifts towards writing. And so the purpose of the essay is really to take that presentation topic that students have been researching and really go to another level of critical engagement and analysis with it. So we ask students to find some further academic sources to support their essay, to then develop a plan again, which is in consultation with teachers, and a draft paragraph from their essay. They receive feedback, targeted feedback on each of these pieces, designed to help students take the next step and really strengthen and deepen that critical analysis in the essay, which is then submitted at the end of the course. So in this, we're trying to create an assessment which is authentic, which is engaging, which, as I said, touches on all of the course learning outcomes that we have in the course. But of course, this process needs to be tested. We're implementing it and trialing it in different ways. And I guess, the purpose of presenting today, as with others, is to get your thoughts and your input, and yeah, just share in the process with you. So yeah, I guess that's a good segue to questions. Comments.
Thanks, James. Probably got time for one question.
I have a question. James, do they get to choose their own topic, or do you nominate topics?
So students choose their own topic within their field of study, but they're really supported in that process, firstly by peers and also by one-on-one consultations with teachers. So the topic selection is crucial, as you can see, to the success of the project. And so that purpose statement that students select needs to be approved by a teacher ultimately, as something that will actually work.
Great, thank you.
Okay, maybe if anyone else has got any questions, again, if you can pop it in the chat bar. Svetlana?
Got them. Okay, yes.
Oh, you're good.
Thank you,
okay.
got them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my presentation will be, as I said, a little bit different because I spoke to Sophie. Just there is only one slide, that's all. So I spoke to my colleagues, and I just wanted to share with you what we have done across 3 programs that we have within Education Pathways, which is ELICOS and Tertiary Preparation Program, which is a program that takes students to Health and Sciences, and our foundation studies. So after and this is a brain trust. So I spoke to my colleagues here in North Sydney, and I also spoke to my colleagues in other centres that we have in Melbourne and Brisbane. So I just want to share what we have done. I haven't prepared any particular assessment this time, but I will tell you something on one that we particularly did with ELICOS and direct entry programs. So what started with us was all the modification and changes we had to do since COVID. And unfortunately, we are not a very big center, although we are across the 3 campuses, and we do have a lot of casual teachers, but not many permanent staff. So we had to send the modifications and think about what would be useful for us to keep. And we were lucky that we have already been using a lot of our LMS for assessments, like our essays, and we have been using quizzes before for some assessments. So it wasn't something new for us. So what we were looking in modification and changes, we were thinking about how to adapt our marking guides, and which is very similar to what Tony did with its Centre for Languages at Sydney Uni. And then we thought that we should align and design questions and quiz format within our LMS. So they are more challenging, comprehensive, and critical questions, including more critical thinking responses rather than multiple choice questions, and also doing a lot of randomizing things. So, and there is an example from tertiary preparation program that they actually have students to write an essay where they have 2 texts to use for the evidence. We did the similar things with our reading assessments, which are part of our last assessment proficiency test in the highest level of our direct entry course. We thought the learning outcomes are more important. So it doesn't matter whether we have 1 or 2 reading tests, as long as we test and meet the learning outcomes. We also worked with all those things of whether students can scroll down the test, how to see them, do we need to put a text in the paragraphs so they can answer certain questions, or embedding the questions. We were stricter with timing because at the moment, some of the exams that are done with tertiary preparation course are done online using ProctorU and artificial intelligence, which is a review program, unlike semester 1, when the students were doing their exams on campus. So we could do exams on the campus, and we did the same thing with direct entry. Our students came for the proficiency test or the last assessment to campus, and we did use computer assessment, but the students were sitting officially in our computer rooms. So what we really changed were modification of expectations. So some of the components done with the foundation studies which were take-home components were changed from closed books to open books. We thought that what we did really well was preparation and moderation, because we validated everything that we changed across 3 campuses. We prepared carefully all the instructions. And I think the whole process of preparation of instructions and working on the practice tests and teaching students how to assess, how to attack the process of assessment was more important in this case than changing all our assessments. So the clear instructions were something that we really worked a lot, both for practice and the real task. And we were also checking the students' access, how far Wi-Fi and ability to hear recording. And we, at the moment, of course, are faced like many others. We have students onshore, we have students offshore. There are students who are taking tests on their computers, but there are students who are doing that on their phones, so that all those different variations are there. In the beginning, we thought the timing should be generous, but we realized that's not a good idea. So we changed the timing, we restricted the timing. And I understand what Santina was talking about, that LMS could be very challenging when it comes to how long we give it to students. So we decided, for example, for our listening test, that the listening will not be played by students like we did it first time. It will be played from teacher's computer, and that students will be able to listen twice, but then they will not be able to see the questions before, and they will still have to take notes while taking tests. We thought that there are lots of issues with the students not being able to see multiple pages. They used to drop off during the assessments, and we found that the group presentations were more challenging. But then, since the first attempt changing into individual one, we decided, no, we're going back to our group presentations, and we are going to use Zoom for presentations, although we're using Microsoft Teams for teaching. Security has always been an issue, and there is no guarantee the students will be completing, but we thought that there is a need for adapting assessments further on. For example, we do have reflective writing that we used in our second module of EAP, and that already has been in Turnitin, so we didn't have to change that. But we all have a problem with Turnitin rubrics, so we were worried about how to do that and how the students will get feedback. We found out that the digital literacy is something that we need to spend more time in orientation and preparation, that we need to work on students' typing skills and help them with that, even with the free things, and that students are not familiar with the system, particularly if they're offshore. So there were other issues when it comes to teachers. Teachers thought that the marking online would take more time, but they now find that the teacher-student feedback process is also changing, and we need to think about simplifying marking and standardizing quick sets. So that's why we look in the future plans and modification. But we have taken a lot of positives. We think that using Turnitin, particularly in all three, has been something that was our advantage. And students have been exposed to before that all our assessments and results are stored digitally now, and we can access them with the responses. And we have support from our learning advisors, which we usually don't have somebody within our organizational units. It's much easier for us to share moderation and do the moderation, pre-moderation, moderation and validation. And we have ACU support of support services, which we don't usually have when we do it face-to-face. So we would like to keep this as it is. So one of the things that we are thinking about in future is standardizing quick sets that we use for Turnitin, have the setup of terminology that is used across across our units. Perhaps have one-stop assessment submission inbox where we can use and don't have a problem with half marks and some of the rubrics language, and changing uniform visuals for our students and teachers so it's easy to recognize. So that's something that I prepared. So not particular assessment, and I'm not going to try to share my screen. Well, maybe I will be able, but I'm not sure. I wanted to show you how we had in our LMS, the practice, the instructions. So the students are constantly exposed to scaffolding process of starting and doing the assessment. So that's it. That's the end.
Thanks, Svetlana. Any questions? Again, we've probably got time for one. Anyone wants to jump in?
Svetlana, sorry, it's a shame you can't show us. I was actually quite interested in what you're doing to prepare the students for the assessments, because
I can try, Tony, I can try, but I'm not sure whether it will work.
Because we're finding the same thing, that it's the more preparation you can do with the students, that reduces the likelihood of problems happening during the assessments. So practice assessments beforehand are always good, but we've also had a town hall session with the managers and all the students beforehand, and just told them what to expect and what they needed to do to prepare.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the thing we in the beginning, when we were all online, we had constantly meetings with our teachers. We had also troubleshooting sessions. So I think the instructions for teachers were also important as instructions for students. So I think by now, my colleagues, Libby, Claudia, and if I miss somebody, Maggie or Amanda and everybody, are really becoming experts in doing very specific instructions, very clear instructions. And those instructions are usually presenting on PowerPoint before the beginning of the assessment, so everybody can see them. And I think one of the things that we found because we couldn't have, our LMS is based, of course, on Moodle, but we couldn't do some browser lockdown, and nobody's going to give us money to do ProctorU unless it's a lot of, I mean, TPP, tertiary preparation, is using it for their exams, but they also have 8 units and they are based on semesters, but with ELICOS, it won't happen. So we had to revise our assessments and use them and reuse them in a different way. So change the order, change randomization, use different things, but we are running out of those. So that's the problem.
Thanks, Svetlana. Okay, we've only got about 15 minutes left. I think from what Tony's saying about preparing students, I think that kind of leads into what I prepared. I'll be very quick, only 2 or 3 minutes, and then I think we've got time for another breakout room before we wrap up. So we'll skip the group feedback at the end. I was just going to talk briefly about our listening assessment, and I found it really interesting to listen to Tony and Santina earlier to compare what they've done with ours. Our listening assessment has been relatively successful. I guess our brief when the lockdown began was we wanted to ensure we were assessing the same learning indicators, had an assessment that was easy for students to navigate and minimised problems for whatever reason, and also offered a reasonable level of security. We knew it would be difficult to really achieve all 3 of those things, so we really looked for the best balance. A bit like Svetlana, we had very limited resources. There was no possibility of using ProctorU or getting a license for a lockdown browser or anything like that. And given we only had a small number of students, about 15, we made the decision to deliver and invigilate and do everything in-house. So with our listening test, so the original paper test included a prediction task, a note-taking task, and then a Q&A from the notes. So essentially what we did was basically transfer that straight onto Moodle as best we could. I've just got one slide I'll share, which will maybe make it a bit clearer. I hope you can see that. So we decided to put it into 3 separate Moodle quizzes, and these were strictly timed, similar to what Santina was talking about, with a strict opening time, time limit, and closing time. So with the prediction task, the students see a slide about the lecture they're going to listen to, and there are a couple of questions there, which are, I think there's a multiple choice and a short answer question. So they've only got 5 minutes for that. They then, once they submit their response, most of them do it pretty quickly. Some of the weaker students do use the full 5 minutes. They then go into the second quiz, which is, it's 20 minutes, and I think the lecture is about 19 minutes and 20 seconds or something. So again, similar to what Santina was saying, that they control it themselves. There's not really any time at all to go backwards or forwards. We give a very small percentage of marks to the notes they take. So we like to see the notes they're taking. In the original paper test, they obviously did it by hand on a sheet of paper. And we thought the students would prefer to do that from their homes. But when we gave them the option of using a Google document, they all really jumped onto that. And we actually had a majority of students use Google Docs to take notes, which was really interesting because we could see them jotting down these notes as they went. So once that 20 minutes was up, they could then go into the third quiz, which actually had the questions from the lecture, so that they weren't able to see these questions beforehand. They had to refer to their notes and go through and answer them. that they were initially short answer questions, but using the Moodle quiz, we had a mixture of short answer, multiple choice, and some drag and drop as well. So that was essentially how we went about it. We did, I think that's, stop sharing there. We did an item response analysis and compared the results with our earlier tests, and the results were pretty consistent for the most part. So we were pretty happy with that. We then adapted a similar second version for a second cohort, and again the results were consistent, which was good. So we didn't have any suspicions of cheating. And again, we had one of our teachers invigilate the test and we recorded it. So given that we prepared students quite a bit, they seem to know what to do and what not to do. And what I shared there was the formative listening, and we did exactly the same for the summative as well. So that was sort of the approach we took, and I think in some ways it's similar to Santina and Tony. And for me, it's reassuring to know that we are sort of yeah, on the same page here. So that's about it from me. Sophie, we've got 7 minutes left. I am conscious of time. So are you able to maybe pop us into a breakout room, say for 6 minutes, and then I'll come back for a very quick wrap up if anyone sticks around that long.
Yep, okay, I'll do that.
We've kept more than 60% after an hour and a half. I think that's good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone. I apologise we're a bit rushed at the end there. I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed seeing the different examples from everyone. So I really wanted to get through those 6 short presentations. As Sophie mentioned in the chat, we're actually running 2 of these. So we're going to do a second session on Wednesday, the 2nd of December from 3:30 to 4:30. So that's a 1-hour session. Sophie, I'm not sure how many presenters we've got confirmed for that one.
So we've got 4 presenters and it's just across 1 hour, that session.
Yep. So yeah, we'll probably just do the 1 round, I think. So we'll have the 4 presenters and then the breakout room and the feedback. And just the other thing, you probably all saw the email that went out, I think last week, about the SIG conveners. And this is for all of the SIGs, the direct entry programs, assessment, and all of the others. I'm not speaking on behalf of Cara, but certainly from the direct entry program SIG point of view, I'd really encourage anybody who's interested in helping contribute to the direction of the SIG to submit a nomination. It has been, for me, a really interesting 2 years. I've never done anything like this before, and we didn't really have a template to follow. And for me, it's been really great to see similar faces and have these workshops and open discussions. So I'm really keen to continue in the future, and I really encourage anybody, or if you know of any staff at your centres who would be interested in contributing, to submit a nomination. So that's all.
Are those nominations still open? So did they close?
Nope, they're still open. I think they're open until
Friday?
The end of the week, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to say the wrong day. And shoot me an email, anyone who wants more info, or if you want to have a chat on the phone about, you know, what's involved, then please get in touch. I'll just pop my email in now, the chat.
Cool. Okay. And yeah, thanks again, Cara, for helping to organise this, and Sophie, obviously, for all the hard work you do in managing things behind the scenes. Much appreciated. And thank you everyone for joining us and sharing what you've been doing in your centres.